prosecutes many domestic violence cases every day, every year. Most of our domestic violence cases are categorized as misdemeanors, and the most common charge is assault on a female. We prosecute probably about 4,000 to 5,000 cases in a calendar year. So it's quite a number of cases. And what I wanted to start by doing first of all was talk about what happens once an assault is committed. How do they actually make it into our criminal justice system? And I'm glad because we have folks with the police department here too that can help with this process. But when 911 is called or when a victim reports a case of assault, there's two ways a defendant can get about getting brought into court. One is through an arrest, and the other way is through a criminal summons. Defendants are arrested often if they're at the scene, if officers can corroborate that a crime was committed, often through visible signs of injury on the victim. If the defendant is not present at the scene, then often either the victim or the officer can go to the magistrate and obtain a warrant for that person's arrest. When we're screening a case in the world of misdemeanors, we also look at the facts of the case. You know, one of our realities still today is whether our victim is cooperative or is not cooperative based on where she is in her life, in her world. And it's just a reality we have to deal with. So what we look at in screening a case is what other evidence do we have to be able to prove a case if our victim isn't present for the trial of the matter. So what do we look for? And I'm going to go through all of these in more detail later, but we look at the photographs, we look at the officer statements, we look at the sometimes jail calls, and we look at other types of evidence to see what we have to strengthen our case in front of a judge. I've been asked this before, and I'll kind of switch over and talk about it, but a lot of times, especially in the domestic violence community, there's a big push and a legitimate push to try to make a lot of these crimes felonies. And in our world that we live in, especially in Mecklenburg County, I think trying a case in front of a district court judge as a misdemeanor, we can have more success than in prosecuting a case in front of a jury. Even today, and one thing I've noticed in my years prosecuting cases, juries still, our community still needs to be educated about domestic violence. And the reality is our jurors have an idea of what domestic violence is, but that isn't always consistent with the reality of what our victims go through on a regular basis. Often we try to do the best we can to work with that victim and explain to her why we do what we do and why we need to proceed in the way we're going to proceed. And sometimes that makes a difference. Sometimes listening can go a long way to change the course of a case. But it's still a challenge. And even though I think our agency works very well with the law enforcement agencies, and I think we're getting much better in collaborating with NOVA and Impact and probation. So we are making a lot of progress, but on the same hand, there's still a lot of work to be done to make sure that, you know, we can get victims into court and that batterers can be held accountable. I think anytime we get the community here as a group to discuss domestic violence issues, we learn from each other, and to know what our office does might help another agency in how they operate. And when I come to listen to somebody else speak, I can learn what they do, and that can help me in prosecuting my cases. So whenever we get a forum like this to speak, it's a great opportunity to help our victims of violence.